My guest is Stanley Corey. He's a certified financial planner. He is an author. His book is called The Divorce Dance. You can find it at any reputable bookstore, and it is it's what you want to avoid. But if you are there, it tells you how to protect your money, how to manage your emotions, and also to understand the legal issues. But the more important thing I think that Stanley suggests throughout all of this is the importance of communications. How is it that all of a sudden you stop talking to each other once you say "I do"? How is it that you leave your responsibility to either side as opposed to participating in it and understanding? How is it that you now become blended but not single? And what I mean by that, it's all right to have a blending account, but also have your own account. Why shouldn't you have? Part of what makes you exciting to him or vice versa is that you are independent and that you're out there and that you know what you're doing. And you shouldn't give that up, but people give it up and say, this is the better way. It's not the better way, is it, Stanley?
Not always. I think that especially when you think of people getting married later and already having established themselves, each person may already have a home, maybe have a condominium or a townhouse, or they've been working for 10 years. They've got some money's accumulated. So, yeah, I think it gets back to this communication issue, understanding how the other person thinks, and talk about what their expectations are. What are their goals and dreams and aspirations and so forth. If you're going to have children, okay, you have to have the conversation ahead of time. Talk about what is that going to do to the family, or how are you going to plan for that, what's involved, and what your thoughts are about education and other things. So the more you can converse with each other and talk about the things that are important, that will avoid conflicts later on. I mean, it's very simple. This is all about conflict avoidance, I always say. Marriage, we always kind of weaving and diving and bobbing and so forth. But the reality is, if this is your spouse that you're supposed to trust, and if the trust gets broken, unfortunately, for whatever reason, then you end up in divorce. It's a sad time, but there are ways to go through that. So the other little part I put on is that we mentioned earlier. Divorce is just a process, and it's a stage and a turn in your life. But you need to understand the consequences of the decisions being made in that divorce settlement, because you can't divorce your settlement later on. And it's very important that you understand what does the division of property, the assets, the income, what is that going to mean to you a year and 5 years down the road? Many people get to the point of agreeing to a divorce, either for whatever reason, and they'll, are just uncertain, but they're being told, is this okay? And they're going, oh, I don't know, but yeah, I need to get out of this divorce. I don't want the process. It's expensive. They'll sign off to be done. And then a year or so later, when their emotions settle down and they're trying to live, they don't understand what happened.
And what about what we have before? You know where I'm going with this. Before we got married, you had this, I had that. Are you one who suggests that a prenuptial agreement is important or no?
It is in certain cases. I would say if there's significant wealth involved or significant intellectual property or something else that is outside the marriage. Typically in Virginia, when we talk about if anything you've accumulated prior to the marriage is typically considered outside of the marriage, non-marital assets. Anything you accumulate during the marriage becomes marital assets other than by inheritance. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot of issues about understanding that one fact of what's marital and what's not marital. If there's some confusion or there's a significant asset, it may be worth having some agreement that recognizes this particular asset that would be excluded from any future consideration in the marriage. But for the 99% of the time, it's unnecessary, in my opinion. You're basically laying out a divorce plan
before you get married.
And like I say, sometimes in large estates, large dollar issues, big inheritance, all these different things that have impacts, it may need to be spelled out a little bit, or at least in specifics to that particular issue.
Let me ask you about this issue, and I know you've heard it before. The fights and the battles and not getting along, and he or she says, I want a divorce. You start the process.
Yeah, the 4 terrible words that is a life changer instantly. That basically is many times is the emotional shock of that person receiving that note without having any expectation of that occurring. Actually, I address exactly that in the book. The husband comes home and basically says that. And it takes several days. You go into a fog, you go into a questioning of everything, you seek out family and friends, you basically are just very, it's almost as bad as a death, but many times worse.
Yeah.
And so it's just the shock of things. And that's why you need to create a team and people of trusted advisors that can work with you, help you through that process.